The Panther tank, Germany's pride. Its thick sloped armor, deadly 75mm KWK-42 gun, and intimidating silhouette struck fear into every Allied crew. For years the Allies had struggled to bring it down. Every engagement was a gamble. A Sherman, even the 76mm variant, could be shredded before it even fired its first round. But in 1944, a quiet revolution was brewing behind Allied lines. American and British engineers studying captured German tanks and their armor layouts realized something crucial. The standard rounds were no longer enough. They needed something faster, sharper, deadlier. Thus was born the high-velocity armor-piercing round, HVAP. A bullet of pure velocity, designed to pierce the Panther's seemingly invincible armor. At first the concept seemed audacious. The 76mm Sherman was already lighter, faster, and more maneuverable than German designs. Could it really take on the Panther in a head-to-head duel? Engineers ran calculations, adjusted metallurgy, and pushed gunpowder formulas to the limits. Every round was tested under extreme conditions. Extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme recoil. The goal was precision, to allow a Sherman gunner, often just a few hundred meters away, to pierce armor that had once been impervious. When the first HVAP rounds rolled off the production line, tank crews could hardly believe the promise. Training exercises were conducted in secret. Sherman gunners lined up on captured Panther hulls. The rounds screamed through the air, striking target after target, punching through the thickest plates with terrifying ease. The battlefield, once dominated by fear of the Panther, was about to change. In Europe, Allied tank crews faced the daunting reality of late-war German armor. Many had already seen comrades fall under the first shots of Panthers on the Western Front. But with HVAP, a new hope ignited. The first combat tests were electric. Shermans equipped with HVAP rounds engaged Panther units near the hedgerows of Normandy. At long range, a Sherman gunner fired, and the shell penetrated armor that had seemed untouchable. The Panther shuddered, flames erupted, and German crews abandoned their pride. It wasn't just the destruction that shocked them, it was the sudden reversal of power. Allied crews who had once ducked behind cover now advanced with confidence. They could engage, hit, and survive. The Germans, meanwhile, were scrambling. Reports of Panthers being destroyed by what they had called inferior Shermans reached the high command. Tactics had to change. Positions were abandoned. Ambushes became frantic. No longer could the Panther rely solely on its armor and firepower. The battlefield itself began to shift. Allied forces moved more aggressively, supported by tanks that could finally punch through German defenses. Shermans didn't just survive, they thrived. They hunted Panthers like predators, closing the psychological gap that had haunted them for years. Behind the lines, engineers documented everything. Every successful shot, every failed attempt, every battle tactic that changed because of HVAP. They refined production, ensuring each round would perform consistently. This was precision warfare, a fusion of science and courage that tipped the scales. By late 1944, the effect was undeniable. Panther units were no longer the unstoppable force they once were. Sherman crews gained confidence. Allied armor began pushing deeper into Germany, no longer deterred by fear of impenetrable steel. Each HVAP round fired represented more than just a kill, it represented the power of innovation under pressure. A reminder that in war, strategy and technology could equalize even the deadliest weapons. And for the Germans, the realization was bitter. The machine they had designed to dominate the battlefield was now vulnerable, outmatched not by sheer numbers or courage, but by a carefully engineered secret hidden in a shell. As the war drew to a close, surviving Panther crews could only watch as Allied Shermans rolled past, HVAP rounds ready, engines roaring, unyielding. They had underestimated the ingenuity of their enemy. They had overlooked the simple fact: speed, precision, and innovation can overcome brute strength. The 76mm Sherman, once mocked as inferior, had become a Panther-killer. And in that transformation, the balance of armored warfare was forever changed. From the Normandy hedgerows to the streets of Cologne, HVAP rounds gave the Allies the edge they had long sought. Panther tanks fell to machines once dismissed as weak, proving that sometimes, a single innovation can alter the course of history. And when historians look back, they don't just see a tank. They see a story of courage, ingenuity, and the relentless will to survive. A story of how the underestimated became unstoppable. The Panther was feared. The Sherman was mocked. But in the end, one innovation decided who would dominate the battlefield. German tank commanders could hardly believe what was happening. Every engagement seemed to confirm a nightmare. The Shermans weren't just surviving, they were killing Panthers at ranges that had once been considered impossible. Reports came in from the front lines. Entire Panther squads immobilized or destroyed before they could react. German tactics, honed over years of experience and pride, were failing. In the midst of battle, crews noticed patterns. HVAP rounds didn't just pierce armor, they disrupted the confidence of the enemy. Panther gunners hesitated, knowing even a single shot could end their tank. The psychological edge had shifted. Fear no longer belonged solely to the Allies, now it shadowed the German crews. Meanwhile, the Shermans continued their relentless advance. Tank commanders coordinated with artillery, infantry, and air support in ways that amplified the effect of the HVAP rounds. A single hit could change the entire outcome of an engagement. Every successful strike emboldened the crews, and the Allied momentum grew unstoppable. In workshops behind the lines, engineers studied reports from the field. They refined the ammunition, adjusted propellant charges, and improved targeting techniques. Every iteration made the Sherman more lethal against the previously untouchable Panther. What began as a technological experiment had become a decisive weapon of war. By late 1944, Panther units were being reassigned or withdrawn. They could no longer hold defensive lines effectively. The Shermans with HVAP rounds were tearing through Germany's armored defenses with a combination of precision, speed, and unrelenting pressure. The once feared German tanks were now symbols of obsolescence. They were defeated not by courage or numbers, but by innovation, the kind of tactical and technological foresight that defined the Allies' final push. Soldiers on both sides recognized the truth. The Sherman, once underestimated and mocked, had become a killing machine capable of turning the tide of armored warfare. Its transformation through HVAP ammunition demonstrated that even the mightiest opponent could be overcome by ingenuity and adaptation. And as Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany, the Panthers continued to fall, their legacy of fear replaced by the undeniable reality. The era of the Sherman had arrived, and the Panthers could not stop it. The battlefield became a chessboard of steel, fire, and smoke. Sherman crews learned to exploit every advantage the HVAP rounds offered. They aimed for weak spots previously thought unreachable, the lower glacis turret sides, even the rear engine compartments. Each successful strike changed how tank battles were fought. Panther crews scrambled to adapt, but every adjustment seemed insufficient. As days turned into weeks, reports from the front highlighted a shocking trend. Panther units were losing more tanks to Shermans than to any other Allied weapon. Entire ambushes were being countered before they could fully form. The psychological toll was immense. The very tanks that had inspired fear now inspired doubt, hesitation, and desperation. In one engagement near the Roer River, a Sherman platoon faced a squadron of Panthers entrenched along a ridge. The Panthers opened fire first, their cannons thundering through the misty morning. But the Shermans, equipped with HVAP rounds, returned fire. Shell after shell found its mark. One Panther erupted in flames. Another was immobilized as the crew scrambled to save themselves. By the end of the skirmish, the once dominant German tanks lay shattered, and the Shermans pressed forward, unscathed. Back at German headquarters, reports filtered in from all over the Western Front. Commanders were forced to admit a harsh reality: the Sherman was no longer a tank to be ignored. The HVAP rounds had transformed it into a vehicle capable of defeating their most advanced armor. Morale suffered. Tactical plans had to be rewritten. The Germans were fighting a war they could no longer control. Meanwhile, Allied crews grew bolder. They coordinated attacks across forests, villages, and open plains, knowing that each HVAP round fired was a guarantee of disruption. The balance of power in tank warfare had irrevocably shifted. The once mighty Panther, designed for superiority, now represented vulnerability. Every destroyed Panther reinforced the lesson: in war, adaptability often outweighs raw power. The Shermans, modest in appearance but enhanced through engineering and innovation, demonstrated that a simple concept executed perfectly could overcome the most fearsome adversaries. And so the armored battlefields of Europe were transformed. Where fear had once dominated the minds of Allied tank crews, now surged confidence, fueled by knowledge, precision, and the unstoppable force of the HVAP-equipped Sherman. The Germans tried to respond, fielding new tactics, dispersing units, and coordinating ambushes. Yet time and again the same outcome repeated. Shermans penetrated armor that had been considered invincible. Panthers fell in numbers that shook the Reich's command. Every engagement, every successful strike, every fallen Panther was a testament to innovation, and to the quiet, relentless power of the Sherman that no one had seen coming. The story continued to unfold across the Western Front, each battle reinforcing the lesson that underestimating a weapon, or the ingenuity behind it, could cost everything. The hedgerows of Normandy became the stage for this deadly new reality. Sherman crews, now seasoned by months of combat, moved with a newfound confidence. They knew the HVAP rounds could penetrate Panther armor at ranges that had previously been considered safe for the Germans. Every valley, every ridge, every turn in the road became a calculated opportunity. In one famous encounter near Cannes, a small Sherman platoon faced a Panther company entrenched on a slope overlooking a vital road. The German tanks waited, confident in their superior firepower and armor. But the Shermans advanced deliberately, their gunners taking careful aim. A flash of silver from a 76mm HVAP round, a deafening impact, and the lead Panther erupted in fire. Shock spread through the German lines. Other Panthers hesitated, unsure of where the next round would strike. Within minutes, the platoon had shattered the Panther formation, securing the road for advancing infantry. These encounters were repeated across the front. Reports filtered back to command. Panther crews were now avoiding engagements whenever possible. Ambushes became rare, retreats more frequent. The Sherman, once underestimated, had become the hunter. Engineers behind the lines continued refining the ammunition, learning from each battle. They adjusted propellant, improved shell aerodynamics, and ensured every round could deliver consistent results. Field commanders shared tactics, coordinating with infantry and artillery to exploit the full potential of HVAP. What had started as a technical upgrade became a force multiplier, turning ordinary Shermans into elite Panther-killers. Even the Germans recognized the change. Veteran tank commanders wrote of frustration and disbelief. No matter how we positioned our Panthers, they fell one by one. Their guns were fast, precise, and unstoppable. It was not skill we faced, it was inevitability. The psychological effect on German crews was as potent as the ammunition itself. Fear replaced confidence. Hesitation replaced aggression. Where once a Panther could dictate the battlefield, now it fled before the Shermans could even engage. By late 1944, the balance had irrevocably shifted. Shermans equipped with HVAP rounds spearheaded every Allied advance. They cut through fortified positions, opened supply lines, and ensured that no Panther could dominate the fight. The Western Front was no longer contested, it was under new control. Field reports tell of Panther crews surrendering after the first volley, acknowledging that their tanks, once symbols of German superiority, were no match for the precise and relentless Shermans. Every fallen Panther reinforced the same lesson. Technology, combined with innovation and adaptability, could triumph over brute force. And so, across Europe, from Normandy to the Rhine, the HVAP-equipped Sherman cemented its legacy. It was not the largest, not the heaviest, and not the most fearsome tank in existence. Yet it became one of the most feared and effective armored vehicles of the war, a testament to ingenuity, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of advantage. The Panthers that once inspired terror became symbols of what happens when strength is outpaced by innovation. And every Sherman that rolled forward with HVAP rounds blazing told a story. Never underestimate the underestimated. All across the Western Front, Panther crews began to realize the stark reality. The Shermans weren't just upgraded tanks, they were hunting machines. In forests near the Ardennes, Panthers lay in ambush, waiting to strike advancing Shermans. The German crews were confident. They had superior armor, high-velocity cannons, and years of training. But as the first HVAP rounds tore through their defenses, that confidence crumbled. One account tells of a Panther commander ordering his men to fire as the Shermans approached a narrow valley. The Shermans didn't scatter. They pressed forward with disciplined precision, each round finding its mark. The first Panther was disabled in a single shot. The second was immobilized moments later. By the time the third tried to maneuver, the Shermans had flanked it, delivering another deadly round. In less than 15 minutes, a small squadron of Panthers had been neutralized. The psychological impact was devastating. Where German crews had once acted with arrogance, now there was hesitation. Every shadow could hide a Sherman. Every hill could conceal a shot that would pierce their armor. Back in command posts, German officers debated strategies, trying to find ways to counter the HVAP-equipped Shermans. They adjusted firing positions, increased reconnaissance, and attempted to concentrate forces. Yet no tactic seemed to work consistently. The Shermans were faster, relentless, and their gunners had become masterful at exploiting the ammunition's precision. The HVAP rounds didn't just pierce armor, they rewrote the rules of armored warfare. Panther crews found themselves forced to fight defensively, retreating more often than engaging. Positions once considered safe became death traps. Morale plummeted as the Allies continued their advance, their armored spearhead unstoppable. On the battlefield, it became clear that raw firepower alone was not enough. The Shermans, humble in design but deadly with HVAP, were redefining combat strategy. Tank commanders began coordinating combined arms attacks, using the HVAP rounds to punch holes through Panther defenses before infantry and artillery moved in. Every engagement further showcased the strategic advantage the Allies had gained. By early 1945, reports from the front lines indicated an almost complete reversal of armored dominance. Panther units, once symbols of German invincibility, were being systematically destroyed. Sherman crews, previously cautious and defensive, now led the charge across liberated towns and key strategic points. The Western Front had shifted irrevocably. Even the most experienced German tank commanders admitted defeat on paper long before the battles ended. The HVAP rounds had not just destroyed tanks, they had shattered the aura of invulnerability. The battlefield no longer belonged to the Panthers. It belonged to the Shermans and the crews who knew how to use them. Every destroyed Panther told a story of innovation triumphing over brute strength. Every advancing Sherman demonstrated that adaptability and ingenuity could outmatch even the most feared designs. And every Allied victory with HVAP ammunition reinforced a lesson the Germans would never forget: underestimating your enemy is fatal. The final months of the war saw the Shermans' dominance become undeniable. In the dense forests and rolling plains of the Rhineland, German armored formations attempted one last stand. Panther and Tiger units, their crews hardened by years of combat, prepared for the Allied push. But the HVAP-equipped Shermans were ready. In a decisive engagement near the Roer River, dozens of Panthers waited in ambush, confident in their superior armor. The Shermans approached cautiously, their gunners steady, their loaders primed. The first HVAP round struck. The impact ripped through the lead Panther's glacis, igniting the fuel and sending it spinning off the road. Chaos erupted. The German tanks scrambled, firing wildly, but the Shermans advanced in coordinated precision. One by one, Panthers were disabled or destroyed. Tank crews surrendered, abandoning vehicles that once seemed invincible. Across the front, the story was the same. Every engagement, every valley, every ridge echoed the same message: the Sherman was no longer the underdog. It was the hunter, the predator that Germany could neither match nor anticipate. Field reports described stunned German crews. "We knew the Sherman was upgraded, but we never imagined it could perform like this. Our Panthers fell before we even had a chance to aim." The psychological edge had shifted completely. Where once Allied crews feared the Panther, they now advanced with confidence. German morale plummeted, hesitation replaced initiative. The Panthers were no longer the kings of the battlefield. The HVAP rounds had not only pierced armor, they had pierced the myth of German invincibility. Sherman crews, once cautious and defensive, now led the armored advance into the heart of Germany. They destroyed fortified positions, cleared towns, and secured supply routes. Each victory was a testament to the combination of ingenuity, engineering, and courage. By April 1945, the Panthers' reign was over. Surviving units were either destroyed or abandoned as Allied forces surged forward. The Western Front had been transformed by a simple innovation: high-velocity, armor-piercing rounds that turned a modest tank into a legend. When historians look back, they see more than a tank. They see a story of adaptation and ingenuity triumphing over what was once considered superior might. The 76mm Sherman, armed with HVAP ammunition, became the weapon that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast the fearsome German Panthers. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke cleared, armor lay broken, and the lesson was etched in steel: in war, innovation can redefine power. The Shermans rolled on, victorious, proving that the underestimated could rise to dominate, and that every battle could be changed by the right technology in the right hands at the right moment. The Panthers, once feared, became relics. The Shermans, once mocked, became legends. And the HVAP rounds that made it possible became a symbol of how ingenuity can turn the tide of war. The war was ending, but the story of the Shermans' transformation would echo for generations. A reminder that in warfare, intelligence and innovation often outweigh size, armor, or firepower.